Hello everyone, this is Jasmina, and in this video I am revisiting the Sun and Moon arrival dates. And in this video I'm going to attempt to do the following. I'm going to try to answer many of the general questions that people have asked, and more than one person has asked these kind of questions. I'm going to also try to make it easier for you to find your particular dates for your particular residence using two free websites. And I'm also making available, of course, for sale, some diagrams that will aid in this, but you can do this exercise yourself without using these diagrams. So you can do it for free. Now the video will cover how you use the Sun and Moon arrival dates in these three areas. The biggest one that most people talk about is for renovation of areas where you have an annual affliction. And of course, that has to be done with care, otherwise you activate it and then you start having lots of trouble. Another time you can use the Sun and Moon arrival dates is moving into a residence that has either a sitting or facing direction that has an annual affliction. And also, if you want to change the period of your house, depending on which method you choose, you may also need to worry about the Sun and Moon arrival dates. Now, that's not always true for the change of period, but some of them are. Now, apartments, flats, condos, all these things, they typically cannot have their period changed because you have to have whatever happens apply to all floors and all apartments, and that almost never happens. So this part really only applies to a house. Now the Sun and Moon arrival dates come from one of the two Black Rabbit date selection parts of that whole system. These dates allow you to safely perform a renovation in an area with an annual affliction without activating that affliction. And that is very, very important if you want to avoid trouble. So if you do not use these dates, you are extremely likely to activate the annual affliction, and others will say you're guaranteed to. But perhaps if it's a very minor renovation, it won't be. So it's a bit hard to tell. Now, if you move into a house that is either sitting or facing on an annual affliction, you should also use these dates because there's a lot of activity. And if you do somehow activate an annual afflictions, it does cause problems in your life, but it only lasts to that end of that solar year. So it's not forever. So if you have to do something that is going to activate an annual affliction, doing it as late in the year as possible is the smart thing to do if you have to do it. Now, if you don't have either condition, that is, you're not trying to renovate in an area with an annual affliction, and you're not trying to move into a house, or you're not trying to change the period of your house, you don't have to worry about the Sun and Moon arrival dates at all. You can totally ignore the rest of this video. You can just stop right now. This is for people who are trying to do something that would activate an annual affliction. So these dates that are associated with this correspond to the location of the Earth in its orbit around the Sun. They demark 15-degree sectors centered on the Sun. Now, exactly where 0 starts in the actual orbit, I can't draw you a picture, but I can tell you it is the date of the solar new year, when the solar new year starts. That is the position in the orbit around the Earth that everything starts, and that's associated with 0 degrees north, even though north is pretty relative when you're looking at the orbit of any planet. Now, the Earth's orbit is very slightly elliptical, so it doesn't have a big difference between the perigee and the apogee points. So that means that the number of days vary only a few. So it's between 14 and 16 days throughout the whole year. So everybody has at least a 2-week period where they can do something. Now, what we are doing here is we are looking for the alignment of your house facing or your house sitting, and then there are 2 other directions that are in 3 harmony with your sitting that aligns with the right position of the Earth in its orbit. And then at that point, that 2-week period, or that 15-degree span in the orbit, your house is protected from harm. What we are doing here is we are aligning heaven and earth. So heaven protects earth, and that's why your house is protected. Now, these are the periods when you can do things that would otherwise activate an annual affliction, and you don't activate it. So I'm going to emphasize this several times because that is what is the key point here. Now, this protection remains in duration of the activity as long as you don't have large gaps in working. And this means you only need to start the renovation or move in that first day within one of your resident's sun and moon arrival date windows. Then you can continue afterwards. It's okay, because it becomes, let's say, the new norm of the activity, and the house is okay with it, and it doesn't, I mean, the annual affliction is nullified for that time, for that activity. Now, the calendar that this type of the Black Rabbit date selection system, it uses a solar calendar. Now, there is a general Black Rabbit system that is used for date selection and basically just tells you a certain value for every day of the year. That one uses the lunar calendar, and I do talk about that in another video. But this one uses the solar calendar, and very specifically, it uses the 24 solar terms. And this is in Chinese or in Cantonese, this is Jithei. That I often refer to it that way. It seems easier to say than solar terms. Anyway, these dates are those dates, again, that allow you to renovate areas of your residence that have any afflictions without activating them, or moving in without activating them, or changing the period of your house without activating them. Now, the renovation must start on a non-clash day of the people who live in the house, or will live in the house, within the sun and moon arrival dates in an area without an annual affliction before moving to the area with an annual affliction. And I'll talk a little bit about what constitutes a renovation in a few slides. But this is key. You have to start in a good location and then move to the afflicted location. The renovation can extend beyond that 2-week period. And most decent renovations, most large renovations, do last longer than 2 weeks. So, and this has been shown by other practitioners that this does work, that it's okay to go beyond 2 weeks. However, if you have long breaks of like more than 2 weeks of no activity, you may have to restart in the next sun and moon arrival dates to be safe. But there are ways to keep the renovation going too, even if for some reason, maybe supply problems or something, delays things. You can take actions that keep this going. Now, what constitutes a start of a renovation can be one of the following, and this is where you start in a place without the annual affliction. You could have the workers who are going to do the renovation, and that could be you too, start in an area that does not have an annual affliction and then just move on. Now, this assumes that both areas need renovation. If you are paying for this, I wouldn't add another section of your house to be quote unquote renovated if it doesn't need it, because that's a waste of money. Now, this works sometime, it doesn't always work. And here's an example. For 2024, if the room you want renovated is entirely in the west sector of your house, which has the 5 yellow, and that includes all 45 degrees of the west, you can't use this tactic because there were no unafflicted areas in that room. So that could be the case. However, if your room is entirely in the southeast, you could have the workers start in Southeast 2 because that's clear of an annual affliction. Southeast 1 has the Grand Duke and Southeast 3 has one of the 3 killings, but Southeast 2 is clear, so at least it's possible. However, you are probably going to have to be there to ensure it happens properly, because basically unless you know that the person, the foreman or the person in charge there knows why you're doing this, that is, knows feng shui, uh, they probably will just think this is a little quirk of yours and won't guarantee it happens. However, they only need to start there. Just do any work in that area, then they can move to the others. So in theory, you could be there, make sure they start in the right place, and then head off to work. You'll be a little late for work, but it probably won't be a disaster. Now, other ways of doing it is drilling into a wall and doing this more than one place. You have to drill, maybe a dozen holes or nail a dozen nails into the wall. Now, you don't have to nail it in all the way. In fact, that's not a good idea. You can just go an inch in, and that's totally fine. Picture hangers are a little safer. They're designed not to damage anything behind the wall. Drilling into the walls, especially in a place like a kitchen, is very dangerous because, well, if you do not have gas, you don't have to worry about it, like a gas stove. But you could accidentally hit a gas line, and that could destroy your house and kill you too. So it's really, you have to be very careful about that. That's why I prefer nails. And actually, I prefer picture hangers because it's a lot uh, a lot easier to deal with, and they're also not such big nails. So these are ways you can do it. And you're talking maybe about a dozen, and this has to be into the walls in an area of your house without any annual afflictions. Now, you do want to be careful of untimely stars in your house's flying star chart. Now, if you have an activated combo 10, pearl string, parent string, or 7-star robbery, all your stars are timely in your flying star chart and you don't have to worry about this. For period 9, the star 3, 5, and 7 are untimely stars. But that's only for those who do not have an activated special formation of the 4 I just listed. So, and some of these are pretty easy to get, like the combo 10 is quite easy, and there's quite a few houses that have that, but you have to check that to be sure. Now, later, after the work has started in the other location, you can remove these nails, patch the wall, paint. Nobody has to know what ever happened. So that is doable. But you want to leave the nails there until the work starts in the afflicted areas, because those nails act as the start of the renovation. Now, not the easiest, especially if you don't like cleaning, but the safest way of doing this is a thorough cleaning of a room that does not have an annual affliction, that is totally clear of an annual affliction for the whole room. You still want to avoid the untimely stars in your flying star chart, so this could get a little tricky, and you can hire someone to do this, so you don't have to do it yourself. Now, this would include, when I say thorough cleaning, this would include washing the ceiling and the walls. Now, I don't know how you clean wallpaper because I've never had it, but cleaning the wallpaper appropriately. And also the floor. If it's a hard floor, you can, wash it. But if it's carpeting, you use a carpet cleaner. And then you also need to move all the furniture and clean behind the furniture, underneath it, and move it all back. So it is a big job. It's not, and this is why it's considered an activation. Now, if it happens to be a kitchen where you have a lot of built-in cabinets, of course you do not take the cabinets off the walls. But when you're doing the cleaning, the washing of the walls would include washing inside and outside of the cabinets with a damp cloth. You're not scrubbing them unless they're truly dirty. And and that means, of course, taking all the dishes out, and you know, it's a real big job, but it can be done. Now, starting the renovation in the area that doesn't have the annual affliction on a non-clash day is important if you want a smooth renovation. And the non-clash day refers to a non-clash day for the people living in the house. Everybody's year clash should be avoided. So don't do it on a day where somebody's year pillar or year animal clashes with the day's animal. And you should also avoid a month clash with the working adults because that affects their career. If you have a large family, it's harder to do to avoid everybody's clash for all of the four pillars. But of course, if you can do that, it's even better. But sometimes somebody has to sacrifice something. But remember, this is only for the rest of the year. This is not forever. So it is not as bad as you might think. So basically, if you know somebody has to sacrifice something because you've got too many different animal signs, using the last date of a given year for the sun and moon arrival dates is a good idea because some of those can be 3, maybe 4 months before the good date arrives. And but you can also wait until there's no problem there. But this is really only necessary to wait to near the end if somebody's clash day cannot be avoided because you're trying to lessen the problems that they may have. Now, if you really want the smoothest renovation, which depends on how serious the renovation is, if it's not major, then, you don't really, only certain things can go wrong. But the smoothest renovation, you want to do that cleaning or the nailing or whatever on a date that's good according to general date selection that is not a clash day for the people in your house. That will give you the smoothest possible renovation. But that's not always possible because there are 2 week periods without any really good dates. So it's best. I mean, there actually could be a good date there, but it may be a clash day. Not starting on a clash day is much more important than trying to find a good date. This is just if you're lucky enough and you have a couple dates to choose from and one is better than the other, that is the day I would start. But you don't have to absolutely start on a good general date selection day. Now, kitchens are the rooms that often have the most issues when you're trying to renovate, and that's because there's a lot of stuff behind the walls. And some of it can be on the dangerous side, like gas lines. So, if it turns out uh, that you can't have the workers start in the sun and moon arrival dates, but maybe they can start a week or two later. There is a trick here you can do in a kitchen that you really can't do in other places. First, you would start cleaning or doing the nailing in an unafflicted area of your house, and then you keep the renovation going by removing at least one cabinet every day or two from your kitchen. That is part of a renovation. And and unless your cabinets are custom built, they're modular and they're very easy to remove. We've done this. The other nice thing is you can actually save money by doing this too. Your company has to know you're going to do it, but I think it is worth the effort. We saved over 10% of the cost of our kitchen renovation by removing the cabinets ourselves, all but the sink cabinet. And of course, we took the countertops off and everything too. Um, and by painting, we saved over 10%. It was definitely worth it because it's not a lot of work. Now, this will allow you to have the renovation start on a good day, even if the workers can't arrive within that sun and moon arrival date. And you can have up to 2 weeks of inactivity in that area, but preferably you have enough cabinets that removing them one every couple days will give you enough time until the workers are going to come and really start doing the construction. And so this is a way to kind of get around some of these windows. But this really only works in the kitchen because you have numerous kitchen cabinets. So now we get to the heart of how to find out when the time is. Which of these four solar terms that applies to your house is determined by the facing direction of your house? You could say it's also determined by the sitting. They're in practice, since they're opposite each other, either one could be stated that way. But if you live in an apartment or a condo, the facing direction you're going to use is your unit facing direction. And that's determined either by the facing direction of your balcony door, if you have a balcony, or the largest window if you don't. And that would be a balcony or largest window in the family area, not somebody's bedroom, but in the family area of the apartment. Sometimes this can be a little hard to figure out. In some of the real modern buildings, this can be a bit difficult. Now, the dates of the sun and moon arrival are indicated on a lopan in the heaven plate. And that plate is shifted by 7.5 degrees from the earth plate. The earth plate is the one where you determine your house's facing direction. And this is the one that most people know about. Most people don't know about the heaven plate and the man plate, but and they've just seen the earth plate. It's not a big deal. It just makes the diagrams a bit funny looking. And the chart does look a bit cockeyed or screwy or weird, whichever way you want to describe it, but it's correct. And it's and what is happening is you're associating the heaven plate with a particular part of the earth plate. And that's how we determine when heaven and earth align. Now, the dates in the Gregorian calendar will vary a little bit for the start and end of each of these 24 GTA, but they aren't off by more than a day or two. So it's not too hard to figure out when you know a table how to read it. The Hong Kong Observatory has the dates and times that you need for any year um, that is the current year and the next 2 years. So you can plan ahead by quite a bit. And it doesn't have them for all years, but it has it for these years. Using these dates properly, that is starting the construction properly, will protect you from any negativity at least to the end of the solar year. And if there's no big breaks, it's likely to be good until the work is done. Now, if one year ends and the next year that area being renovated does not have an annual affliction, then you don't have to worry about this anymore. You're good. You can have breaks. It doesn't matter. It's like you're doing a construction in an area that does not have an annual affliction, where you don't have to worry about the sun and moon arrival dates. So any activity that happens after the window has gone, you still are protected as long as you started it properly and don't have large gaps between working days. Now, if supply issues stall the renovation, and you can actually keep the renovation going by nailing some nails into the wall in the area of being renovated that has the annual affliction, as long as you haven't let a 2-week period go by before you start that. And you can remove those nails the day before the work recommences, so it's not a big deal. Um, you know, if you need to patch some of these things up, if they haven't painted the drywall, uh, you can do that the day before. It's okay. Or you can just say, I'll take care of it and don't worry about it to the workers, and you just do it later. So, and if the drywall's not up, you just do it into the studs. Now, again, try to keep the delays to no more than 2 weeks. 1 week is a lot safer, but according to the experts, 2 weeks is acceptable. A little dangerous, but it's acceptable. And you can't let it go longer than 2 weeks, because then you have to wait for the next sun and moon arrival date to come by. So here is the chart that I've been hinting at. The inner ring is called the Earth plate, and most people have seen the Earth plate before. And the center of the rat is at 0 degrees north, and this is the plate that we use to determine your house's facing direction. And this outer ring is the heaven plate. It may be a little hard to see, but the dates actually start here, February 4th of 2024. This is for this particular year. And that goes counterclockwise around this ring. And that may seem a little weird, but it has to do with the orbit of the sun, the orbit of the moon, the Earth around the sun. And instead of starting in the middle of this, starting at 0 degrees, it starts at 0 degrees. And this is how these two are off by 7.5 degrees. Now I've highlighted every other one of these to show you where the links are. And so these are the dates that, for example, the Southeast 3 is aligned with the heaven plate starting on August 22nd of 2024. And I have put down the names of the GTA, and they're in Chinese because they're very short. The English words are very long. It's just easier this way. But this is not too important. It's the date that's important. And as I said, if you were to take a spaceship, which we don't really have any human ones do this yet, but you leave the Earth closer to the equator and you head towards the North Pole, but you keep going, you go up, and then you fly over to the sun, but you're way above the sun, you're not in the sun, and you look down on the orbit of the Earth around the sun, you will see it goes in a counterclockwise direction. And that's why the dates do this too. This is why it goes in the counterclockwise direction. And you can determine which way we're moving if you know how to observe the stars. And ancient people knew this. Once they realized the Earth went around the sun, they knew what direction it was going. Now I've done a blow up of this area here so that you can see it a little better. And so this is the start of the solar new year, and it's about 14 days long. Next year, in 2025, this date here for the start will be February 3rd. And the reason is we have a leap year in the Gregorian calendar, and we do not have a leap year in the solar calendar. So that is why this date of the start of the solar year can vary by a day or two from year to year. But the Hong Kong Observatory website tells you everything you need to know about this. So this is how the house's directions are linked to the dates. And this is each one of these, the white ones and the purple ones, each one of these is a certain time when a certain direction aligns the heaven plate and the Earth plate. Now, you only need to know your residence's subsector in general. You don't need to go to an exact degree, and that's why I don't have every single tick mark here. You only need a rough idea. You just have to know which subsector your house faces. The first thing to look at is look at your house facing. Let's say this house faces West 3. So it faces here. This gives a date, April 4th of 2024. That's the start. Now, it does not start at midnight. The exact transition time is noted on the Hong Kong Observatory site. And this time there is it's for the whole Earth. So if you have to start it, you should, on the first day, you should check and see what time in your time zone the Hong Kong Observatory date and time states for the transition. So it can be kind of late in the day sometimes. So you have to be a little careful on that first day. The second one, the one right after it, is a little later. It might be a little hard to read. It says April 19th. So that means between basically April 4th and April 18th, you have your 2-week window where you can start a construction in an area that has an annual affliction. So this is number one, the first group of 2-week windows. The second one comes from the sitting. And if it's a West 3 facing house, it'll be an East 3 sitting house. And this dates will be from October 8th to October 22nd. And then there's the 3 harmony with the sitting. And so the 3 harmony, 24 divided by 3 is 8, so it's 8 slots away. So I've counted them out in both directions, and these two are also 8 spots from each other. So this forms an equilateral triangle. And these are the other sets of dates. So this one is June 5th to June 20th. And this one is February 4th to February 18th. And these as a total are 4 different sun and moon arrival dates for the entire year. Now, the nice thing about this, the period of your house is irrelevant. The period that we are living in is irrelevant. This chart is good for every house that has a definitive facing direction and for any period of the house or where we're living. You only need this chart once for any place that you're living in, and you will know the dates you can renovate. So I'll give you a couple more examples. This I've summarized. This inner part summarizes the thing. We have the facing direction, we have the sitting, and then we have the 3 harmony ones here. So this happens to be a Northwest 3 facing house. It's going to have dates in late February to early March, from later part of April to early May, from late part of August to early September, and the late part of December to early January. So it has all of these 4. And this also applies to a Northwest 3 facing unit in an apartment building or a condo. So here's another example. Now, if you notice, these 3 dots didn't change, but the facing did. Another facing direction where these 3 dots won't change is East 3, because if it faces East 3, it's going to sit West 2. So these just happen to be that way. Of course, if we were to move over one slot, everything would move over one slot. So that relationship between these 4 dots is consistent. It just depends on which way you're pointing them. So what I am selling is this ring, and there's 3 pages. One page has all the tables for 2024, and you can just fill in the dates and for subsequent years by looking at the Hong Kong Observatory site. And it has this, which you can print out on a sheet of paper. And then it has this interring, which you line up this crosshair with this crosshair and rotate until you find your facing direction. And just read off the dates. It's that simple. And this is available at my coffee store. Now these, like I said, they're good for any period that we're living in, any period of the house, and any facing direction. But it does have to have a definitive facing direction. It can't be right between two of the subsectors on the Earth plate. It has to, you have to know what direction it faces. And of course, I'm a believer this has to do with true north, not what your compass reads, because that changes over time. Now, the exact Gregorian dates for any given year can be found at the Hong Kong Observatory website. You can Google Hong Kong Observatory solar term and you'll get there. But this is the actual website. Now, if you need to use that first date in any given solar term, you should convert the date and time stated on the Hong Kong website to your local date and time. And that's because this date and time represents when the center of the Earth moves from one 15-degree sector to another one. That is a real point in time, and that occurs for the entire planet. So it's not your local time, it's Hong Kong's local time, and you have to convert that to your local time. And this can be done with the help of this website. Both of these websites are free, so that's nice. And again, this, I'm explaining it again here. You're doing this because that point in time when the Earth passes from one sector to another, it happens for everybody on the planet at the same time. And so that's why you have to convert the local Hong Kong time to your local time. Now, otherwise, avoid clash days, at least with everybody's year animal and with the month animal of the working adults when you're choosing a time. If you're not worried about the first day, if you're not going to do something on the first day, you don't have to worry about all this. It's only on that first day, because that first day doesn't start at midnight. It can start at any point during that day, because it's truly physical. Where is the Earth in its orbit around the sun? Now I'm going to talk about newly built houses. Houses that are newly built don't have their clocks start until either an owner or a renter spends the night in the place. And that basically is required because a house isn't considered born, um, because it must have the heaven, earth, and man all be there. All three have to be there before you mark that point in time that the house is now an entity. So basically, the Earth date is marked as when the foundation starts. But that doesn't complete the house, of course. The heaven date is the roof's completion date, the roof of the entire houses. Not just part of it, but the entire one. But that's still not enough to give birth to the house. The last thing is almost always the man, and it is determined by the first night you spend in the house. So if your house started in period 8, but you don't move in, you don't sleep there until period 9, it's a period 9 house. And this is very consistent from everybody that I've listened to. Now, this is true of a house or an apartment building if it's newly built. But it is not true of an apartment that's already there. When you move in, the period of the apartment has already been determined, unless you're the first tenant, and then you determine it. Now, so basically, the house isn't born until somebody sleeps there, and that's going to define the period. And they just want to be really clear about that because there have been several questions about houses being built and spanning the two periods. Now, if this newly built house has a facing or a sitting that is in one of the annual afflictions, moving into the house should also be done within the sun and moon arrival dates. Now, you don't have to start anything there, you just move in. You're not doing a renovation. You just have to move in that 2-week window, and you want to do it on a non-clash day, obviously. And the reason why this can be activating is there's so much activity that, especially if it's facing it or your main door is located in the main door that you're going to use to move things in and out of, if that's located in an annual affliction, that's also pretty activating. So in general, it's safer to move in during the sun and moon arrival dates, unless you know that maybe you only have enough furniture for 2 rooms and those rooms happen to not have an annual affliction, then you don't have to worry about it. Even if it sits or faces that, it's usually not a big deal. But most people have more than 2 rooms of furniture. Now, the start of the construction of a newly built house, you don't need to consider the sun and moon arrival dates because the house isn't born. There's nothing to consider. And so it's fine. However, you can look at good date selections using the general date selection methods to pick a good groundbreaking day if you choose to. It probably will make the construction go better, but a lot of times you don't have much choice here. It's going to happen this day or months later. And so, you might get lucky, you might not get lucky. Uh, Especially if you're in a place that doesn't really know much about feng shui, they are going to say, well, this is the day we can do it. We're going to do it, or you're going to have to wait 3 months. Then, you can make a decision then whether or not you want to do it. I am not too picky about this because the house has no effect on you, although maybe the construction will go better if you happen to be lucky enough to have it start on a good date. Now, the last thing is if you wish to change the period of your house, there are 3 ways to do it. And I'm going to cover this implication with the sun and moon arrival dates for each one of those. One of the easier ways is to have no one living in the house for 90 consecutive days. And that means that the family that normally lives there cannot enter the house at all during those days. They have to be totally out of the house. If you want someone to check on the house to make sure that things are okay, if you have a trusted friend or family member who can come in, nothing looks disturbed, and leave. You don't have to move all your furniture out. You don't have to do all that. You just have to be out of the house. Now, if your house has a sitting or facing in an annual affliction, you want to move back in during the sun and moon arrival dates. You can move out at any point, but you want to move back in within the sun and moon arrival dates on a non-clash day. So again, you can move out, it doesn't matter. Moving out is nothing. It's moving back in that's key. The second way of doing it is to remove the entire roof down to the rafters or the trusses, depending on how your house is built, and then you replace the decking and all the waterproofing and then the final coat of whatever it is, metal, tile, shingles, whatever. That can do it too. But unless you really have to replace your roof, this is a very expensive thing to do. In general, this only takes a few days unless you have a very complicated house. But because it affects the entire house, because the entire roof is removed, you would want to start it during the sun and moon arrival dates. And you can move back in, and hopefully it can be in the sun and moon arrival dates, but it can extend a little beyond it, like a day or two. It would be okay. But it can be in the same solar term, the same GT window. But It doesn't absolutely have to be, it's just a little safer. And it's usually pretty doable. And of course, again, you want to avoid a clash day to start and avoid a clash day to move in. Now, another way is to add or subtract 1/3 of the area of the existing house. And this is another expensive thing. So it's maybe one of the later things you would consider, not your first choice, unless you wanted to expand anyway. Now, here we have to really look at the circumstances. If the area of your house being added or subtracted is not in an afflicted area, the construction can start in any good day using the general date selection methods. You don't have to worry about the sun and moon arrival dates. But if the house is sitting or facing an annual affliction and you move out during the construction, then moving back in should occur in the sun and moon arrival dates so that you're not activating it in any way. Now, you can also instead stay in the house while the construction is going on. Most of the time, that's possible. It's noisy and a bit obnoxious, but if you can handle it, then you don't have to worry about moving back in. But this only applies if this area is not in a place where the area you're adding or subtracting is not in a place where you have an annual affliction. So that all this applies to that condition. Now, if instead the area that you're trying to add or subtract is in an area with an annual affliction, then you have to start that construction within the sun and moon arrival dates. And of course, you want to start it the normal way you would for any construction or any renovation being done in a place that has an annual affliction. So start in a place without it and move to where it is located. Now, if you can stay in the house, you can also just live through all the noise, and you don't have to worry about moving back in within the sun and moon arrival dates. Now, if you do choose to leave during the construction and your house is either sitting or facing an annual affliction, then you really should move back in during the sun and moon arrival dates. Now, that could mean, most of an addition to a house is going to take you longer than 2 weeks. It probably would take you several months. The pattern of the timing between these is if you start with the facing, there'll be 2 months before you have another date, another sun and moon arrival window. Then there's 4 months to the sitting, and then there's another 4 months to the other of the 3 harmony directions. And then there's 2 months before you're back to the facing. So that could be quite long. But if it's a really big remodel, you may be out of the house for 4 months and it's anyway. So it's not so bad. But that makes the timing a lot trickier. You could move back in while some of the construction is finishing, if it is in the sun and moon arrival dates. You can consider that. There's nothing wrong, as long as it's in any one of those periods, it's okay to move back in. But this again is only if you're facing or sitting is in an annual affliction. If you don't have that, you can move back in when the construction is done, if you have decided to move out. So I think after all that, you can see that if you're going to put an addition on the house or take something away, it's a lot easier to do it during a year when that area does not have an annual affliction. This can be quite complicated, but any one of these 3 actions can change the period of your house. So if that's your goal, these are the rules according to the sun and moon arrival dates. So that's it. I know this was a long one. I'd like to thank you for sticking with me. And again, if you want the charts, they're available here at the coffee store. But basically, I really like to thank you for watching.